Hey, TJ, welcome to Keep What You Earn.
Hey, Shannon. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Would you mind just introducing yourself real quick to those listening? Let them know who you are.
Yep, my name is TJ Slattery. I'm the owner and founder of Crowsnest Consulting based here in Denver, Colorado. I do strategic advising for small businesses.
And Crowsnest Consulting, that has to have some type of meaning behind the name. I love how creative that is. Do you have any history there, any background on why you named it that?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. So I've got, I don't know, 20, 30 metaphors and sayings and stories I've come up with over the years. And this one kind of came up organically when working with clients and saying, where are we trying to get to? What does a crow's nest mean for you? And that's for people, me, I want to be more profitable. I want to grow my revenue. I want to have more freedom in the business. Because when I start working with clients, they're usually the ship's out to sea. They're doing really well. It's afloat, but they're below deck with everybody else taking on water. And they're just shoveling water and it's all they have time to do. So my job is to come in and operate as a navigator on where you're going to go, help you put in a bilge pump, maybe replace the work that you're doing with a few other employees and get you up in the crow's nest so you stop hitting icebergs and you're actually able to look out for land. So it's getting people into a position where they've got some space from their company and they're not just grinding every day. They can start planning for the future and hitting goals and actually getting to a destination.
Yeah, you guys know I love metaphors, so I love that one. And I like that you're also saying it in terms of, when you're in the crow's nest, you can see the rocks that are coming and allow people to steer in another direction versus reacting to getting those rocks hitting your boat and then really having to clean up a mess after the fact and being reactive. Is that also kind of part of the metaphor?
Big piece of it. I mean, it's if you're below deck, you're hitting rocks, you're staying under deck to keep shoveling and trying to patch things up until you can get your, head just above. So it's a similar piece where it's giving you the ability to look out and see what's, coming ahead in your business so that you have a plan for steering around it, or you already have a contingency plan set into your business that if you hit a rock, it's okay. We've planned for
Mm-hmm.
this. We have a backup team and a solution, a fire squad. It's not a big problem. I can stay up in the front leading.
So what's the metaphor for the essential periscope? Because, I think not everybody, but a lot of small business owners go, yes, that sounds great. What are the tools? Who is the person? What is the process? Like, what do you call this? It's like, yes, I need that and I know I need it, but I don't know what to ask for. I don't know what to be looking for. What should I be Googling or chat GPTing or what should I be focusing on when it comes to identifying, you know, what could be coming down the pike and how to approach it? What are the tools?
Let's see. So the biggest piece I can give as far as what you want to implement for a tool to see in the future, see what's wrong is, so that third party perspective can help a lot. So having somebody else look at your business because you're kind of in the trenches all the time with this, tunnel vision of this is all I work on, is all I see, but somebody with a fresh mind can come in and take a look. I'm like, have you thought about X, Y, and Z? Like, oh my God, why didn't it even cross my mind? Because you're, in the trenches. So
Mhm.
having a third party take a look under the hood on what is happening in your business is very helpful. The second piece you can do on your own is just to take a step back and give yourself some time, not working on all the problems in the business and look towards the future. And a lot of us talk about doing, what's next as far as financials, but spreading that out and saying, how does that affect everything else in the business and start doing your own planning and saying, not just what does revenue look like, but every other facet that I can start tinkering with now and prepare.
Yeah, and I mean, then the objection comes around going, well, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what's coming. I don't know what to expect. You know, what are the things that I should be compiling? What are the things I should be making for myself? Like, what is that called? Forecast, projection. We have this term in accounting, pro forma, which I think you work with as well. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what are the different things that we should be, operating with in order to generate that sort of prediction?
It just takes a lot of thoughtful analysis and knowing the different components of your business and saying, if I'm, hypothetically doing double my revenue next year, what does that mean for my marketing? How much does my marketing spend have to go up in order to do that? And what kind of leads is that going to generate? And if I'm growing at this rate, what might that mean in my other systems? Like, do I have to, recruiting plan to bring people on to help with X, Y, and Z? But it's doing some critical thinking and saying, it's not just the top line that I'm focused on. It's not just the bottom line. It's everything in between. And what does that mean for my operations? If I can try to use a crystal ball and say 6 months from now, I want to be this much revenue. Okay, well, what does that mean for my org chart, my accountability chart? Do I have to bring other people on? Where do my responsibilities shift? Or in 6 months
Mhm.
from now, I don't want to be doing X, Y, and Z jobs anymore. That's great. But let's make a plan and visualize it. What would that look like as far as the structure of your business goes as you move into that position, start moving things off your plate? So it's,
Yeah.
yeah, doing some introspection and having a bit of imagination, looking and saying, if I'm doing this much revenue, that means X, Y, and Z is going to be affected. How can I prepare for that change?
Yeah, I think it's understanding relationships between things from, when I do this, this thing happens over here. I think that we tend to operate, especially in the financial space, and a lot of business owners are learning this, is they're operating in isolation with like a revenue goal or a profit goal, but without consideration for the multidimensional impact that those things have and what else has to happen in order to do that. And what's funny is when we operate as CFOs, we actually look from like the outside world and say, what are some of your goals? And let's say one of the goals, from one of our clients is, I want to have enough money to send my daughter to private school next year. Cool. We want to generate that from the business. So we take that goal and we strip it back into financial goals that trickle down from the revenue to the profit to the cash flow and say, you're going to generate this additional cash flow from this profit, from this revenue. And what I love about what you do is then you take that from there. We throw the baton to TJ and say, what will it take in
Yes.
order to make that happen? And that's where we tend to pass the baton because we are not operators, we are not marketers, we are not, we can't tell you exactly what that looks like. Sometimes we can definitely give you the path from with dollar signs on it to get there. But what people tend to overlook is the operational component of that as well. Do you agree?
Oh, you hit it on the head. This is a problem I've come across with numerous clients and people I've spoken with that are business owners, where they're at step A, they see step B, see in the distance, and that's that planning of I want to add my kid's school or other retirement funds, and great, I know what I have to get top line. I know what that means for bottom line. Great, let's go. It's like, well, you missed step two. That's the most important part, and that's the operational. And I don't know if you're a fan of South Park. You ever watch that show?
Oh, yeah.
And they have a whole component about underpants gnomes. I don't know if you remember that episode.
Yes, I do.
Right?
Yeah.
And so the underpants gnomes, the one kid, Tweak, is always freaking out about stuff. And he comes, you guys, the underpants gnomes came again. They stole my underwear. And they go, that's impossible. There's no such thing as underpants gnomes. He goes, there really is. It's okay, let's stake out your room and see it for ourselves. So they stake out the kid's room, and sure enough, midnight stroke comes around, and underpants gnomes come in, and they climb up the stairs of the underpants and steal them. And they're singing the song about stealing underpants gnomes. Like, oh my God, they're real. This can't be happening. And they go, but why? Why are you stealing underpants? And they go, it's simple. Step one, steal underpants. Step two, step three is profit. They go, well, what's step two? And they go back to their big whiteboard. Go, step one, steal underpants. Step three, there's a big question mark under step two. And so it's thinking like, we're going to do all these big numbers next year. We're going to hit these. Great, let's go. But without the planning and thinking, like step two is the biggest part about how you process your underpants, like how are you actually going to get to step three. So it's slowing it down. And, a lot of entrepreneurs are visionaries and they're excited to go after that big number, but you need to go through and critically think through every step of your operations and what levers you have to pull in order to affect that change.
So we're going to name this episode "How to Profit While Stealing Underpants" with TJ Slattery because that's really funny. That would be good for SEO. No, but you hit the nail on the head with that. Where people are missing the middle step there, which is how to operationalize it. Now we can talk about like sell more. Obviously, that's a big part of it. But we were talking about this a little bit before the show, and we were kind of unpacking this. And I think you introduced this idea of like, who do you have to be and what does your business have to be in order to process the thing that you're looking for? So in order to double your revenue, 2x, 3x, 4x, whatever it is, whatever your goal is, we don't ask ourselves that question enough of what business do I have to run to be able to do that? And what has to change? And I think those are the core questions that we need to be asking ourselves, right?
Oh, absolutely agree. And it's, again, that introspection on saying, okay, here's where I want to be. And if those are my numbers at the end of next year, what does the middle part look like? And I love taking this and saying, your pro forma might include so many pieces, even in, your marketing strategy and sales plan and recruitment plan, but what does it look like for your org chart? If you're going to double revenue, like what's coming off of your plate, because you're going to drown if you're still doing your bookkeeping after that stage,
Mhm.
and you're spending how many hours a week in your books and you're not a CPA or a bookkeeper. That needs to get handed off. And so where does that come up on your org chart? Other admin
Yeah.
stuff. I was working with a client just a couple weeks ago, and she's like, I have an eye twitch, and she's doing like 2.5 million revenue in a healthcare business. I'm like, why is your eye twitching? She's like, I'm gonna get this cold and have to fire somebody after this call. I'm like, oh, it's terrible, because I know that feeling. It's really rough. But I'm like, you're doing 2.5 million. You have 60 employees under you. Why are you still part of the firing process? And what else can we have to play? Also, I have all this mail I have to open. I mean to get off my plate forever, but I'm still opening all the mail for the business. It's like, let's start thinking through like what your position is going to be in the next few months, because we need to get this off your plate, because these are distractions that if you're trying to, 60% or 100% double, increase next year, these little distractions are only going to extrapolate. And so let's look really clear at what your role is going to be at that revenue point you're trying to get to. And if things are coming off your plate, how does that affect your other team members? Do you need to have new hires? Is it a new management system? Is it promoting somebody within? But thinking through, what does that mean for the structure of your business in order for you to achieve, what will that look like that aligns with that pro forma you put together financially?
Yeah, and just to unpack that with pro forma, can you give a like rough and dirty Sesame Street definition of what a pro forma is for the folks listening? Because even I sometimes struggle with explaining it, but I'd love to hear your definition of what a pro forma is and what it does.
Yeah. So the way I use pro forma is looking at it as a forecast over the next year. And it's saying, I want to hit this amount of revenue, backing it up in every month and saying, okay, best way for me that I would create this as like a fractional CFO is take your P&L from this year, copy paste 2025, and start using those numbers to give you a forecast of what that next year is going to be. And so for me, that's the basic pro forma on the financial side. As far as the definition goes, is really your forecast on what's this going to look like in every facet of the business. When I say like a holistic pro forma, it's yes, those numbers and expenses on what you expect it to be, but the other components of your business that's not really on your P&L, on areas that have to grow in recruitment and your time and productivity, in your marketing spend and sales and operations. And so a pro forma is really that complete integration of those different systems that match up with your financials.
Yeah, so basically like the figures that do or don't have dollar signs on them and the different data that you can be tracking to say this is what we need to be expecting in the future. I look at it also as what if scenarios, because you can have a pro forma that is based on a certain amount of growth or a certain amount of a change. So for example, I'll use a business like mine as an example. If I said I wanted to 2x revenue, well, there are different ways to do that. I can increase price. I can sell twice as many customers. I could also I could increase the value and increase price, I should say. I can sell twice as many customers, or I could have my customers last longer or rebuy. And then it's kind of going, whichever one of those strategies I do, that's going to impact what you're talking about. Because if I say I want to sell twice as many customers, well, we have to fulfill on that, which means I'm going to have a fulfillment pipeline issue or fulfillment bottleneck if I have the same size
Mhm.
team but twice the volume. So that's kind of the thought process you want people to go through, right? To figure out, well, how are you getting to that number? And then what does that mean downstream in terms of, the impact to your team, the impact to your operations? Can you still be operating with the same CRM if you have one? Are you still looking at the same calendar of your time that you are right now? What are you going to be doing? What aren't you going to be doing? What are some of the other questions that people can be asking themselves as they're kind of contemplating this projection into the future?
It's going through, and I like to look at businesses broken up in growth versus scale. On the growth
Hmm.
side, your financials, sales, and marketing. On the scale side, this is the counterpart is your productivity and time, what your leadership looks like, and what your recruitment strategy is. And so, kind of thinking through those 6 areas as broken out into 2 areas, as each stage of this growth period, how are those going to be affected? So, okay, if I'm by April, I'm doing a quarter more business. I've broken out, got my 3 revenue streams. Holy cow, I got to move 36 boats. By April, that's not sustainable. I need to adjust the percentage of my revenue that stream is going to take up. So, to your point,
Hmm.
those performers, it's really important that you're able to manipulate it. And so you
Yeah.
build that out and say, this is X percent of that. Well, what if I want to bring my COGS down? So I got 78% COGS, but if I can reduce that to 47 by the end of the year, how does that affect my numbers? And so being able to manipulate those numbers in your performance is very important, but also thinking through, okay, I'm trying to do these big shot numbers for next year. I might have to change my, to your point, like the revenue stream piece on what price am I selling? How many units? If there's no way I can sell 47 boats next year, I got to maybe move some of the percentage of revenue that I'm trying to gather into different revenue streams or change some of the other inputs that you have in that model.
Yeah. And I think it's just so important to understand that downstream impact and also understand that you have to be nimble with these things because, you know, business changes constantly. So having that pro forma, like you said, a holistic pro forma, but also one that you can use as a tool constantly, right? Because I'm assuming you mean that this type of deliverable, what you're putting together, it doesn't just get like made for 2025 and sits there and like, that's the Bible, that's the doctrine, we're doing this. It doesn't
Yeah.
follow the pro forma. Like, let's talk about the function of the pro forma when it comes to planning and how in ink is it?
Yep. I mean, you're exactly right. This is not a PDF. I, I love working with these on, Google Excel docs and going through and say, okay, well, how did last month go or this quarter? Like, wow, the numbers were way different than what we thought. Let's go back through and examine this and maybe make some corrections for the rest of the year. And saying, hey, our conversion rate really didn't hold up for those leads going into sales. We need to put a lot more into the marketing for different prongs of attack for the next, for the rest of the year. Okay, let's increase our marketing budget by 25% and see if that affects, helps to, course correct for those initial assumptions that we made. And so it's always a good way to have, here's our assumption for the year. Let's go into it, see how we do. These are the goals. And then you're able to keep looking back at it and say, oh, these numbers have to change. And so that's a working document throughout the year. It should be radically different by the end of the year. I mean, hopefully it's not. If all your projections are great and it's perfect, that's wonderful, but it's kind of your guiding light on here's what we're shooting for. And we know that if we're consistently checking in, we can go back and alter those numbers to say what has to happen in the next quarter to change to make sure that the big goal in sight we're still on line for.
Yeah, and if they're all correct, I mean, play the lottery because good for you.
It should
But
not be the same.
right, we all know business changes constantly. I think that's to be made a point. Like this should be. Let's talk about how to use this year round. Some people really get tactical about implementing this. Is this a backdrop in like a leadership call? Is this showing up on the screen when you're meeting quarterly with your financial advisors? Are you showing this like let's talk about the collaboration with your team. Who should be involved in creating and in monitoring progress toward these pro formas and these forecasts?
If you could it's a really good question. So who would be involved in the monitoring update? If you could put a name to each line item in that pro forma on who would own that line or who would be involved at some level, they should be in the meeting for creating this. Or at least once you've created the general outline for your pro forma, if it has to do with marketing, great, bring your marketing person in to say, are these things achievable? What will we need to hit as far as lead generation in order to hit these sales figures? So anyone on your team that would be on that sheet as far as like you would, comment to them, bring them in for the creation because they're going to be an integral piece on setting expectations. They know the best forecast numbers that you can give you. And they're going to be the one that reports to you to say, did we hit that or not? And they're going to be the one collaborating with you on how to make a change going forward if that's not working out. So they should definitely be, people, heads in the room. And then that's the people you meet with to say, all right, here's our forecast. Here's what we did this month. What worked, what didn't work. How can we manifest a change for the future?
Yeah, because not only does that create a sort of sense of collaboration as opposed to direction, like thou shalt hit these results or your job's in jeopardy. We don't want to communicate that. We want to make them part of the process of communicating whether we're on track or off track for meeting these, but without the assumption that if we're off track, that somehow reflects poorly on them, that it simply just reflects we need to steer in a little bit of a different direction or we need to modify our approach. I think that's super important to be part of that process and to get them involved early, right? Because otherwise you're, attaching perceived performance to these things when really it's kind of a shot in the dark sometimes to figure out the what if scenario. And you have to just put numbers on paper or Google Sheets to make sure that you have some type of way that you're moving, some type of direction that you're driving in. So you're not just, operating aimlessly.
Yeah. And those are the people that are on your ship that can report back to you. They have real-time information. You don't want to just ask Susan what the marketing forecast is going to be for next year in October, and then have no conversation and come March. Like, it's way different than what you said. Like, well, you didn't ask me for any updates since October, and I gave you like what I thought it might be, but
Yeah,
times have changed. Why don't you check in with me? So it's
exactly.
having that real time ability to check in with your team and see if we're on course. But also on the flip side of this is a whole leadership component of you're cueing your team in to see like how are we going to make this year come to fruition, depending on how much buy-in they might have to the success of your business. We can say, hey, we're trying to hit this number for these reasons what's within the business, and this is what it means to you if we hit it. So do these numbers look real enough that you think we can knock it out? You do,
Yeah.
great. But also, as you're ticking along, they're seeing that you're taking their input and their suggestions and their feedback and updates to heart, that it's actually affecting the direction of the ship. And that's a huge buy-in that not many owners want to give to their team because they're afraid for the reason of including them. But that's a great piece on the retention level and their ability to know that what they say matters in the direction of the business.
Yeah. And it fosters a sense of accountability and of ownership. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that people take more pride in their work when they feel that sense of ownership in what they're doing and how it's contributing to a bigger goal. I think when you understand the why behind what you're doing and you can see where it fits into a bigger picture, you're more likely to A, succeed, but B, enjoy the process and feel more connected to it because you can see how every daily, weekly step, every behavior is contributing toward those goals. And I think that's a really key connection that a lot of business owners miss.
Yeah, it's the difference of everything you had just said, and I'm actually part of what makes us all work versus I work in a bubble and whatever I'm doing, I think is making an impact. I guess it's working, but I don't really get any feedback on it apart from you did a good job or bad, but I don't know why. But to be regularly updated on the work that I'm doing is influential with the business. I do matter. And it is, yeah, it's a major way to inspire people to keep pushing that and want to be a part of it.
What are some of, I know that you've implemented these with clients, but what are some of the, I would say, success factors or behaviors exhibited by your clients that have been successful implementing this? Maybe best practices learned, maybe anecdotally, hey, this client decided to create this pro forma, implement it this way, and it's really working for them. Do you have any examples of client success to share with our audience today?
Absolutely. For, let's see, for how they've put in the holistic pro forma as far as
Hmm.
their business plan,
Yeah.
or how they included their team and saw success with it.
Both. I think that it's important to see how people have implemented this successfully because I know someone's listening going, this sounds all great, but I'm overwhelmed at how to actually go do this.
Yeah. So, I mean, one example we've put together, say it was with a marketing firm I was working with, and saying they're just kind of out at sea taking on waves, and like
Hmm.
we're doing pretty good year on year, but we've been static on our growth. And we throw up a goal at the end of the year, but we're just like, I don't know, do we hit it or not? We don't really have any traction that's going to push us towards it. So with that same firm, now putting in those goals, incorporating the team, having them do the monthly meetings, and report back on what are they able to do for lead gen, for bringing in enough business to make that happen. Um, Being able to be an integral part of that planning and course correcting, that each month we're saying, hey, we're behind goal. What do we have to do as a team to adjust this? And so they went from doing 900 grand in a year up to 1.4 because they weren't just kind of an ethereal. We're trying to get to 1.5 million this year. It's each month we know what we're trying to set out to do. We have our benchmarks we're trying to hit, and because we're able to collaborate with our team on a monthly basis, we can get that feedback and say, oh, that's why we fell short by 20 grand this month. It's because X, Y, and Z didn't fall into place because this system fell apart. You guys, thank you for the feedback. If I didn't known that, I would just kept hitting my head against the wall without realizing it was that system that was breaking down. And because you're a part of this process and giving me that regular feedback, we can fix this and continue to grow.
Yeah, that goes back to the crow's nest mindset of like being able to have more visibility over where the ship got hit and being able to
Yes.
identify it faster, and seeing what needs to happen in order to remedy it. I think it's a perfect metaphor for it, but it's also, why do you think business owners struggle so much with climbing up to that crow's nest? Why do you think they find themselves so stuck below deck?
Oh, I've got so many reasons for that. A big problem with that owners will have is one, it's a delegation skill.
Mm-hmm.
and being able to thoughtfully hand something off to somebody else. A lot of the owners that I work with started this up from infancy. It's their baby. And you kind of get in your head like, no, it's the responsibility. I have to do this. So it's either like I alone can fix it, or it's the like I have to be the. It's like a martyrdom. Like I have to be the one to do this job, and they don't relinquish the different jobs to different people, and so they're still the one opening the mail and having to do other components of the business. It's like this should be handed off to somebody else, and so they're so stuck in the trenches because they can't hand things off and delegate that there's not enough free time to actually start doing the planning. And then also the realization, I've come across this a lot, where they're worried, well, if I hand off these jobs to other people, like what will I do in the business? And they're afraid of being so detached from the business that they don't have any meaning there anymore. They don't have any influence. Like, just believe me, if you hand these off and let other people do them, A, they'll probably do them better than you. They're specialists to do the bookkeeping. You shouldn't be doing that anymore. But B, when you free up that time, there's a whole next echelon in your stage and your journey as an entrepreneur of things that you will be focusing on that you never thought you'd ever have a moment to spend on. And that's being up in the crow's nest and looking after the future and making these plans. And you're able to have that breadth to start planning ahead and seeing these things coming, where before you're just reacting to every piece that comes in. So it's the prevention is inability to delegate because they're afraid that somebody will mess it up, or they don't know how to hand it over, or I don't know, can fix it. But also there's a guilt of I shouldn't have this much free time to be able to spend on these, philosophical journeys of what should the business do? It's like, well, that's kind of what your role should be getting into. The less integral you become to the operations of the business, the more valuable your company is. And so if you're the one doing all those menial jobs, it's not to the service of your employees or to the business, and definitely not to you. So yeah, those are the few detractors I have found that people struggle with letting go. And then it's, do I have the right person to hand it off to? And so it's getting into their skills as a recruiter, hiring and retaining good people. And it's a bit of fear of letting go of old systems. Say, well, we've had this system for 10 years. It's kind of working. I don't want to change. So there's a fear of change, but it's like, well, that system is 10 years dated. You guys have moved beyond that. You need to be able to adopt a new system and take on a bit of that growing pain and let it go, because it's going to save you 6 hours of work every week. So there's a few things of them kind of being stuck in their ways that they don't want to let it go. And there's a fear of who will I become if I do graduate that far?
Mm-hmm. And I felt this, first of all, guilty as charged on most of that at some point in my business. But also I felt this sense of stalemate of, well, I can't afford to hire someone. And then the constant also tug of war of, but you never will unless you hire them, because you're already at your income capacity essentially of what you can handle, because you don't have open capacity to welcome in more work, welcome in more clients. So you're stuck and you have to make one move one way or the other, and making more money is going to burn you out. Spending more money on them, well, at least you can make that back. Like you can come back and open up your capacity. And that was a huge mindset shift I had to have in my business as well, which was becoming the person you have to be in your growth stage, welcoming that growth with open arms and saying, this is a step I'm going to make in the direction of growth, as opposed to comfort. And knowing that this is what I'm good at. This is what I like. Just because you're good at it doesn't mean you should do it, but also trusting other people with it. I mean, there's so many dimensions to it, like you said, with delegating. But I think that the key is really embracing that growth and understanding what it takes of you to really grow, and letting go is a big part of that.
Yeah. And it's scary as hell. I think one of my favorite things working with entrepreneurs is they're all a bit batshit crazy. You have to be to do the work that we do. It takes like some major cojones to go and do the work that these business owners and entrepreneurs are doing. And you got to be a little bit nuts. And to make that big change, like you mentioned, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. It's like, I've got too much on my hands to take on more work, but I need to make more money to X, Y, bring somebody else on and take this off my hands. And so one, it's, having a really good plan and pro-forma to have clarity in your business what the next 12 months look like. So if I hit X, Y, and Z numbers and these things fall into place, I know exactly what my profitability level is. I know, what my danger level is on hiring somebody to take this off of my hands. Okay, we're clear on that. And you can do as much planning as is possible and looking for, what's going to come down the pipe and what my sales is going to look like. but you've got your plan for your new hire. You know the job that you're going to hand off to them. You know how much time it's going to save you. You know what your capacity is for you to now go bring in more work. And now it's just, pardon me for another metaphor. Did you ever see Indiana Jones 3?
Oh, I probably have. Oh, guys, don't kill me. I'm really bad with movies. Jason makes me watch all the movies. I've seen everything because he made me watch them, but I will probably know when you say it.
That's the last crusade, and he has to go through all
Mhm.
these like tests of faith and everything to get to the Holy
Mm,
Grail.
okay.
And one of them is this, the step of faith, and it's this big chasm he comes across, and it's this big gap, but you have to just have faith that when you take the step, your foot is gonna catch. So in the movie, he has the faith, takes a step, and it turns out it's an optical illusion, and he can see that there's a pathway the whole way there all along. But there's that split second where you take the step and your foot doesn't catch right away. And it's terrifying, but then your planning kicks in, all your processes you put into place, everything you looked at, it works. But entrepreneurs have to make hundreds, if not thousands, of those small or big decisions in their career that like I've
Hmm.
done all my planning, I know my background, I can make this happen. You just got to make the step, and it's terrifying. But that's the piece you have to get over 100 times to get yourself to the place where you're functioning the way you should be.
And just, uh, this is actually the catalyst. This was actually how I quit my job, was a tool just like this. So whether you're running your business or you're making a big decision and making a life change, like this does come in handy, this whole approach, because it turned into a question of, well, when will I make enough money to quit my job? Well, I wasn't going to wait until I was actually making enough, like to match my salary, because in order to do that, I would have to basically be burning myself down completely to do the work of both to get to that point. So I said, I just need to make sure I'm on a trajectory to do that. And I know
Mm-hmm.
when that will happen. So once I actually did a sort of pro forma, I did a forecast of what would it take in order for me to, you know, I've quit my job. I need to make sure I'm quitting my job within 6 months of hitting that goal, because then it'll give me 6 months of runway. I had savings and everything. I said I have 6 months of runway to hit that goal, but I knew every step of the way what it was going to look like, milestone by milestone, and knew I was on the right track. I think that we get caught up in our head of having a big audacious goal, but without having those micro steps in between, without having like an idea of the path and the stops on the bus route on the way to the destination, because that's the key there, is
Yep.
knowing what has to happen on the way and how do I know I'm in the right direction. Because I think all too often we set this kind of goal forecast, this big picture thing, but we don't carve the path on how we're actually going to go do that, or what is the signal that we are moving in that direction. And then you find out way too late in the game that you couldn't hit those goals, because also the goal feels so unattainable when you express it in a certain way. When you say double your revenue, it feels big. But if you said earn another, I don't know, 10K every month, you can translate that to clients. You can then set a goal for yourself that's more micro and more attainable. And then next thing you know, it's like losing 50 pounds. You do it 1 pound at a time, one meal at a time. And you have to figure out how to change your behaviors every day to make that happen.
Yep. It's making that really clear plan on here's the end goal, here's where I'm at. What are the little breadcrumbs that I have to follow in order to get there? And when you break it down to those more palatable bite size versus this is, an
Yeah.
entire restaurant I have to eat next month,
Hmm.
it really makes it more doable just in your mind and in actuality. And it gives you more confidence because you've looked through and said, here's a very detailed plan of all the little pieces that have to come together. And oh my gosh, it's adding, 2 hours a day or week to my plate, but I can do this within 6 months based on
Hmm.
the time it takes me to do this. Like you've done all the calculations behind it. Like, oh, that's actually really doable. And I've got an hour on Tuesday and I got an hour on Thursday to add to my regular schedule. That's going to allow me to, at that rate, get enough done to be where I want to be.
Absolutely. But when it comes to, setting this up and doing it, like we mentioned before, who should be involved in it, but talk to me about how you and your team help people with this, what you recommend as a first step to get started, and how folks can learn more about working with you potentially to implement this.
Yeah. So when I meet with a business owner, first call, we'll just spend 30 minutes and talk more about where they're at right now, where they want to be next year, 5 years, and just kind of get a vision down. So working with owners, it's really important that I'm able to align with them on what those goals are and say, I'm at, doing 250K right now, but I want to be a billionaire in 5 years. I'm like, that's great. I don't know if I can really help you on that kind of trajectory. If it's something that I'm not really want to get behind. So it's figuring out your goal and having a value behind it with like what's the why? Why do you want to double your business in the next 2 years? Why is that meaningful? Like, oh, because it's a good round number. I don't know if I can really get behind that. Let's think more. Does it have to do with how much you're trying to put away for retirement or for your kids or whatever? So it's making sure we're aligning what that eventual goal is, where you're at. I want to hear more about the background of your business, why you got into this, the amount of employees that you have, kind of the assets you're working with. I share more about the work that I do. And then we'll go and really spend 2 hours doing a deep dive on the business to build the initial framework for this holistic pro forma. And so that's kind of like a free strategy session. And I'll get into the details and say, okay, let's hear your business plan. We're going to get this out on an Excel sheet. And I'm going to take a bunch of notes for roadmap items. And while we're walking through, I'm going to ask you a million questions. And you're going to poke holes in the plan that you already have. I'll yes and the stuff you're doing and say, that's really great. Have you also thought of X? Or at the end of it, I might just validate the work that you're doing and say, that's a great system. Glad you're working with that person. Okay, let's move on. And so through that 2 hour period, we'll work as much as we can on that holistic pro forma and detailing out the components of your business and start to see, is there some validity to the goals that you're setting and can we tweak it? And while I'm asking questions, there's always gaps. So I'm building you a roadmap on here's over the next 6 months, the things that you need to go through and work on within your business in order to actually start hitting these goals. Here's all the things that we're missing. Here's what we can implement. And if we decide to work together, we will take that sheet back out and start prioritizing what those major gaps are. And so item 1, we're going to go figure out a recruitment plan because you have a lot of issues with attrition and you're at capacity max. Like, okay, that's item 1. Let's knock that out. And then we're going to hit your financial. But it's doing, a collaborative effort as a non-equity partner to go build that holistic plan and spend time together, meeting twice a month for a couple hours to action that plan, make it as robust as possible, but then go in and actually do the work to make the changes in the gaps in the business that we found.
Yeah, and something like this, if I compare it to like a health journey or fitness, right? It's like having that trainer that knows what muscles to train and what you should be focusing on. It's almost like bodybuilding, it's business building, but it's knowing like this is what you need to be working on, but like this is what you should specifically go do. If you have, especially, I like to phrase things to my business owners like, if you have an hour in the day, this is what I want you doing. Like, this is the most ROI time for you, is if you only have so much time, focus on these few things, because that they'll generate the best results for you for the time that you're spending, as opposed to, I know you have a bajillion things on your desk, get to this when you get to it. We actually try to help prioritize as well and say, this is really going to be needle moving for you, as opposed to, like you said, opening the mail or doing your own bookkeeping. Like those things have to happen, and sometimes they're urgent, not important. So can you start offloading some of those things? Because if you only have this much time in the day, this is what I want you doing. And then we have to start outsourcing the rest, or we have to find alternatives to the rest through automation and otherwise. So I totally agree. I think that's a great approach. How can people find out more about working with you and actually engaging in that process with you, TJ?
Absolutely. If you go and visit my website, which is crowsnestmindset.com, you can go to the Let's Work Together page and book a discovery call.
Love it. Guys, check that out. The link is in the show notes. Definitely explore this opportunity with TJ, because I think not enough people have an appreciation for having that future focused mindset. And the sooner that you can start kind of putting those reps in and start putting yourself in that mindset, the sooner that you're going to be able to grow. TJ, thank you so much for joining me today.
Shannon, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.